for step 6, list the lower class limits in a vertical column and enter the upper class limits. Okay, so since meron na tayong lower class limits, kailangan nating hanapin yung upper class limit natin. Okay? So, nagsimula ang ating first class sa 3, so saan siya magtatapos? Para malaman natin yan, saan ba nagsimula ang second class? Sa 11. So, magtatapos ang ating first class sa 10. And then, since 19 nagsimula ang third, magtatapos ang second sa 18. And then, this will become 26. Ito ay 34. And then, 43 nagtapos, so 42. And then, 43, since ang ating class width is 8, so 43 plus 8, kasama si 43, we have 50. Okay? So, always remember na hindi pwedeng mag-coincide ang dalawang scores sa dalawang class intervals. Okay? Because class intervals are mutually exclusive. So, walang score na maitatali sa dalawang magkaibang class interval. For step 7, represent each score by a tally mark in the appropriate class and then add tally marks to find the total frequency of each class. Okay. So, para malaman natin kung ilan ba ang number of scores sa isang class interval, so kailangan natin ng data. So, ito yung data na meron tayo kanina. These are the test scores of 30 students in mathematics arranged in ascending order. Okay, so mas madali nating maitatali ang scores. So, sa mga estudyante na merong scores ng 3 to 10, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So, ang frequency niya is 4. Next, for 11 to 18, bilangin natin 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, kasama si 18. Next, for 19 to 26 test scores, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So, hindi natin sasama si 28 kasi hanggang 26 lang ang ating third class. Next, for the fourth class, 27 to 34, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, ito yung 5. And then, scores ng 35 to 42, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? And then, for the last one, 43 to 50, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So, meron tayong 4 scores under ng last class. So, para makuha natin ang total number of frequency, we have to add 4 plus 5, that's 9, plus 4, 13, plus 5, 18, plus 8, 26, plus 4, 30. Okay? So, ang total number of frequency should be equal sa ating total number of scores. Determine the class mark of each class. So, the class mark is obtained by getting the average of the lower limit and the upper limit. So, again, ang lower limit ay yung first score sa bawat class interval. So, ang lower limit natin is 3, 11, 19, 27, 35, and 43. Samantalang ang atin namang upper limit are 10, 18, 26, 34, 42, and 50. Okay? So, now, for us to get the class mark, ang class mark is represented by X. So, paano ba natin nakuha itong mga class mark na to? Okay, so one example, para makuha ang 6.5. So, to get the class mark, we have the lower limit 3 plus the upper limit 10 all over 2. Okay, so we have 13 divided by 2. Simply, that is 6.5. Okay, and then, ganun din ang gagawin sa second class. We have to add 11 and 18, and then divided by 2 to get 14.5. Then 19 plus 26 divided by 2, that's 22.5. 27 plus 34 divided by 2, that's 30.5, and so on. Hanggang makarating kayo sa last class interval. Or simply, kung mapapansin nyo, the difference from one class mark to another class mark is equivalent to the class width, which is 8. So, pwedeng kuhanin nyo na lang ang class mark ng first class interval. So, that's 6.5, and then add 8 to get the second class mark, and then add 8 to get the third, and so on hanggang makapunta kayo sa last class interval. Step 9. Determine the lower and upper boundaries of each class. Upper class boundaries can be obtained by getting the average of the upper limit and the lower limit of the next class. Okay, so for us to get the upper class boundary of the first class, gamitin natin yung formula, okay? So UCB can be obtained by adding the upper limit. So the upper limit is 10, and then we add the lower limit of the next class, which is 11, divided by 2. So that's 10 plus 11, that's 21 divided by 2, so that is 10.5. Okay, so for the upper class boundary, we have the 10.5. And then, using the same formula, we will get the upper class boundaries of the next class interval. So this will become 18.5, 26.5, 34.5, 42.5, and 50.5. And then, always remember that the upper class boundary is equal to the lower class boundary of the next class. Okay? So, for this, so ang upper class boundary daw equivalent sa lower class boundary ng next class. So, this is 10.5, this is 18.5, 26.5, 34.5, and 42.5. Okay? So, dito naman, that's 2.5. Okay, so for a clearer view, this is now our frequency distribution table. For step 10, we have to compute the relative frequency of each class. So for us to obtain the relative frequency, we have to get the ratio of the class frequency and the number of observation. The relative frequency is the percent of data in each class. So dito natin malalaman ilang porsyento ba ng total number of scores ang nagland sa isang specific na class interval. Okay? So using our formula, magkakaroon tayo ng relative frequency na naka-flash sa inyong screen. So, gamitin lang natin or as example, itong first class. Okay? So, to get the relative frequency of the first class, we have to get the class frequency of the first class. So, that's 4. Okay? So, we get 4 here. Then, number of observations, that's 30. We get 30. And 4 divided by 30, that is equivalent to 0.13. So simply, we get the percentage of this. We multiply this by 100, so that is 13%. Okay? So for the interpretation of the relative frequency, so let's say, for example, in the table, the relative frequency, 13% of the first class, ito yon, means that 13% of the students who took the exam got a score ranging from 3 to 10. And then, the relative frequency naman of the 17% of the fourth class means that 17% of the students who took the exam got a score ranging from 27 to 34. For step 11, we have to compute for the less than cumulative frequency and the greater than cumulative frequency. This is done to know the numbers greater than or less than a specified value in the frequency distribution. So for us to get the less than cumulative frequency, we have to copy the frequency of the first class interval to the first entry of the less than cumulative frequency column. So, ito yung less than cumulative frequency column. Ito yun. Okay? So, paano natin nakuha yung entry na 4? So, we just have to copy the frequency of the first class interval. Okay, so that's 4. And then to get the second entry, we have to add the first entry of the less than cumulative frequency to the second class interval frequency. Okay? So, the second class interval is 5, or the frequency of the second class interval is 5. So, we have to add it with the first entry, which is 4, to get the second entry. So, that's 9. And then, 9 plus 4, since that is the third class interval frequency, we will have 13. And then, 13 plus 5, that's 18. 8 plus 18, that's 26, and then 26 plus 4, that's 30. Okay, always remember na magtatapos kayo, or the last entry of the less than cumulative frequency is the total number of our frequency. Okay, so for the interpretation of the less than cumulative frequency, let's say, example in the table, the less than cumulative frequency 13 of the third class means that there are 13 students who got a score of 26 and below. Okay, while the less than cumulative frequency 26 of the fifth class means that there are 26 students who got a score of 42 and below. Okay? So, saan natin nakuha yung 26 and below? Since ang third class ay nagtapos sa 26 na score, 13 students daw na kumuha ng exam ay nagkaroon ng scores na 26 and below. And then, 26 students naman ang nakakuha ng 42 and below. So, if we will go back with our set of scores kanina, parehas din ang lalabas na we have 13 students who got 26 and below. And then we have 26 students who got 42 and below as their scores. So, to obtain the greater than cumulative frequency, okay, so we have to copy the total frequency as the first entry in that greater than cumulative frequency. Since the total frequency is 30, so ang first entry natin is 30. So, ito po yung column na pagbabasihan natin for the greater than cumulative frequency. Next, to get the second entry, that is the difference of the first entry in the greater than cumulative frequency, so that's 30, and the frequency of the first class interval. Okay? So, that's 30 minus 4 kasi we have to get the difference. So, that's 26. So, yun yung second entry. To get the third entry, so, second entry minus 5. So, 26 minus 5, we have 21. Then, 21 minus 4, that's 17. 17 minus 5, that's 12. And 12 minus 8, that's 4. And then, 4 minus 4, that is 0. For the interpretation of our greater than cumulative frequency, let's say, for example, the greater than cumulative frequency 26 of the second class means that there are 26 students who got a score of 11 and above. So, saan galing yung 11? So, ito yon, yung ating lower class limit. And then, the greater than cumulative frequency 17 of the fourth class means that there are 17 students who got a score of 27 and above. So, yung 27 naman is the upper class limit of the fourth class. Okay. So, if we are to check sa ating data kanina, okay, so 26 students got the score of 11 and above. And then, 17 students naman ang nakakuha ng 27 and above na score. So, a complete distribution table consists of lower class boundaries, class interval, the upper class boundaries, the frequency, class mark, relative frequency, the less than cumulative frequency, and the greater than cumulative frequency. Okay. So, for the last one, we have the graphical method. So, kanina na-discuss natin kung ano ang iba't ibang types ng graphical method. We have the bar graph, the pie or circle graph, line graph, histogram, and the frequency polygon. So, itong limang ito ay nagkakaiba-iba depende sa gamit at kung paano ipapresent yung data. So, the first one is the bar graph. A bar graph is a pictorial representation of statistical data in such a way that length of the rectangles in the graph represents the proportion value of variable. Okay, so sinabi dyan na siya ay proportional. Okay? Proportional value of the variable, and it is generally used to compare values of several variables. Okay, so ginagamit siya for comparing and at the same time to analyze data. So the length of the bars, so it's either horizontal or vertical. So sa example na to, that's vertical, represents the frequency of the variable and is applicable to discrete values only. So paki-take note nito, nasa discrete lang ginagamit ang ating bar graph. Okay? Next, we have the pie chart or the circle graph. So this is a representation showing the proportions of each class using the relative frequency. Okay? So kapag ginamit nyo itong pie chart na to, this is usually used kapag gusto nating i-compare ang isang class sa kabuuan. Okay? Next. For the histogram, this is a graphical representation of the frequency distribution table, and it looks like a bar graph wherein vertical or horizontal rectangles overlap each other on the lower or upper class boundaries. Okay? So, this is an example of a histogram. So, yung ginamit nating table kanina for the frequency distribution table, ang gagamitin natin reference sa paggawa ng histogram. Okay? So, dito naman, ang kaibahan nito kay bar graph, kasi kanina ganito yung itsura ni bar graph. It's just that sa bar graph, merong spaces, kasi yung spaces na yon dito sa histogram is the representation of the upper and the lower class boundaries. Okay? So, ito yan. Yun. Okay po. Next. So for the frequency polygon, this is a closed figure of the connected line segments whose endpoints are the frequency. Okay? This is usually attached after a histogram is constructed. So ang endpoints daw niya ay frequency. Okay. Okay? So this is an example of a frequency polygon of test scores of 30 students in mathematics. The last one is the line graph. It is a type of chart used to show information that changes over time. We plot line graphs using several points connected by straight lines. We also call it a line chart, and the line graph comprises of two axes known as the x-axis and the y-axis. Okay. So the x-axis is the vertical line, and ito yung x-axis. And then the y-axis is the horizontal line. And this is an example of a line graph. This is usually used when we have to compare the changes over time of the information.
This ends Lesson 4. Congratulations, Grade 8. We are now done with the first 4 topics in Mathematics 8B. So I hope that this video were able to help you to further understand the lesson. At the same time, sana nasagot nito ang ilang mga katanungan nyo tungkol sa ating module. But if you have further questions and clarifications, pwede natin yang i-address during our synchronous class. Again, I hope that through this video, you were able to think, wonder, and explore mathematics through organization and presentation of data. Thank you.